I still remember the exact moment I realized I didn't exist to them. It was a Tuesday morning, 3 months into my position as junior financial analyst at Garrison and Hyde Investment Group, when Victoria Pemberton walked straight past my desk carrying 2 lattes. She handed one to Derek, the other analyst who'd started the same week as me, and completely ignored my outstretched hand holding my coffee order and exact change. She didn't even glance in my direction. It wasn't the first time, and the pattern was becoming impossible to ignore. But what happened next made my blood run cold in a way I still can't fully explain. Derek took the coffee, laughed at something Victoria whispered, and both of them looked directly at me while smiling. Not friendly smiles. The kind of smiles that exist specifically to let you know you're on the outside of something. The kind that measure the exact distance between belonging and exile. I tried to maintain my composure, opening the Henderson portfolio on my screen, but my hands were shaking so badly I had to clasp them together under my desk. That's when I noticed the folder. It was barely visible, tucked beneath a stack of quarterly reports on Victoria's desk as she passed, but I caught 3 letters on the tab, CYP. My pulse quickened for reasons I couldn't name yet. Something about those letters felt significant, though I had no context for why. I made a mental note and tried to focus on my work, but the morning had already planted a seed of something darker than simple exclusion. By lunch, the invisible wall had become a fortress. The conference room filled with the entire analyst team, all 12 of them, for what was apparently a standing Tuesday meeting. I only knew about it because I physically saw them gathering through the glass walls. No calendar invite had reached my inbox. Again, when I stood to join them, Victoria's assistant Patricia actually stepped in front of the door and said, "This one's for senior analysts only, Jade." I'd been with the company exactly as long as Derek, who was already seated at the table, but I simply nodded and sat back down. The humiliation burned, but it was the confusion that hurt more. I'd graduated top of my class from Wharton. My references were impeccable. The interview process had been grueling, and I'd beaten out over 300 candidates for this position. Yet here I sat, frozen out of meetings, excluded from conversations, treated like a piece of furniture that occasionally needed to be stepped around. I couldn't understand what I'd done wrong, and the not knowing was starting to eat me alive in ways that kept me up at night, staring at my ceiling, replaying every interaction. Then at 4:47 p.m., everything shifted. I was preparing to leave when my computer pinged with an email forwarded by mistake. The sender was James Garrison himself, the founder and CEO. The subject line read, Cyprus Protocol Q1 Results. My heart rate spiked instantly. That same 3-letter abbreviation, CYP. Cyprus Protocol. The email had been meant for Victoria, but had somehow caught me in the CC chain due to what looked like an autocomplete error. I knew I should close it, delete it, pretend I'd never seen it. But my cursor hovered over the attachment, and something deeper than curiosity pulled my hand forward. The file was labeled cp_quarterly_reconciliation_confidential.xlsx. I double-clicked before my rational mind could intervene, and the spreadsheet bloomed across my screen in a cascade of numbers that made absolutely no sense at first. Columns of transactions, millions of dollars flowing through accounts I'd never seen in any of our official portfolios. Then I saw the destination account names, and my stomach dropped through the floor. These weren't client accounts. They weren't investment vehicles. They were personal holdings, registered to a web of shell companies in Cyprus, the Cayman Islands, and 3 other tax havens I recognized from my forensic accounting elective. But it was the beneficiary names buried in the metadata that made my hands go completely numb. James Garrison, Victoria Pemberton, and 7 other senior partners. They were siphoning client funds. Not investing them. Not managing them. Stealing them through a sophisticated labyrinth of offshore transfers that created the illusion of legitimate international investments, while actually redirecting roughly 18% of client capital into private accounts. The scale was breathtaking. Over $47 million in just the first quarter alone. I sat frozen, my mind racing through the implications while my body remained paralyzed in my desk chair. And then I heard the footsteps behind me. "Working late, Jade?" Victoria's voice was honey over broken glass. I minimized the spreadsheet so fast I nearly knocked my coffee over, spinning in my chair to find her standing less than 3 feet away, her eyes already locked on my screen. The reflection of the Excel toolbar was still visible in her pupils, and I watched her expression change in real time from casual curiosity to something much more dangerous. Just finishing the Henderson analysis. I managed, my voice somehow steady despite the adrenaline flooding my system. Victoria smiled, but her eyes had gone completely flat. Henderson. Of course. She paused, letting the silence stretch until it became physically uncomfortable. You know, Jade, I've been meaning to talk to you about your future here. The way she emphasized future made it sound like a threat rather than a promise, and I felt sweat beginning to form along my spine. Oh! I kept my face neutral, but inside I was calculating exit routes, witness protection protocols, and whether I'd just accidentally signed my own death warrant. Yes. I think we need to have a serious conversation tomorrow morning. First thing. Just you and me. She placed one perfectly manicured hand on my desk, her fingers drumming once, twice, 3 times. Don't be late. Then she walked away, her heels clicking against the marble floor like a countdown timer. I sat motionless for a full minute after she disappeared around the corner, my heart hammering so hard I could feel it in my throat. The email was still open on my screen. The evidence of massive financial fraud was sitting in my downloads folder. And Victoria Pemberton, senior partner and apparent architect of a multi-million-dollar embezzlement scheme, now knew that I knew something. The question that kept me frozen in my chair was simple but terrifying. What would she do about it? I looked at the clock, 5:02 p.m. I had exactly 14 hours before that morning meeting. 14 hours to decide whether to run, to report it, or to walk into Victoria's office and face whatever she had planned. My phone buzzed with a text from my best friend asking about dinner plans, but I couldn't focus on the words. All I could see was that spreadsheet, those numbers, and the look in Victoria's eyes when she'd caught me. I knew one thing with absolute certainty. By this time tomorrow, my life would be completely different. What I didn't know yet was that I'd just stumbled onto something far bigger than simple theft, and the people who'd treated me like an outsider had done so for a very specific reason. A reason I was about to discover in the most terrifying way possible, and one that would change everything I thought I understood about Garrison and Hyde. But first, I had to survive the night. Before I continue, tell me where you're watching from. I love seeing your locations. Now back to the story. I didn't sleep. By 3 a.m., I'd made 17 different plans and abandoned them all. Call the SEC? They'd need months to investigate, and I'd be dead, professionally or literally, long before that. Go to the police? With what? A forwarded email I'd technically accessed without authorization. Go public? I'd be destroyed by their legal team before the story even aired. Every option was a trap, and the walls of my studio apartment felt like they were closing in with each passing hour. At 6:15 a.m., I made a decision that would either save me or condemn me. I arrived at the office at 7:30, 90 minutes before Victoria's requested meeting time. The building was nearly empty, just security and the early morning cleaning crew. My badge beeped at the elevator scanner, and I rode up to the 19th floor with my heart in my throat, carrying a shoulder bag that contained something that could either protect me or seal my fate. The office was tomb silent. I walked straight to my desk, powered up my computer, and did something I'd never done before. I accessed the shared server using Derek's login credentials. I'd watched him type his password dozens of times. He used the same one for everything, his dog's name followed by his birth year. Sloppy security, but it was about to become my lifeline. The system accepted the credentials without hesitation, and suddenly I had access to files I was never meant to see. What I found made the Cypress protocol look like petty theft. There were dozens of folders, all with innocuous names like market research and client diversification, but when I opened them, I found the real architecture of the fraud. Garrison and Hyde wasn't just stealing from clients. They were running a sophisticated Ponzi scheme, using new investor capital to pay returns to existing clients while funneling the difference offshore. The company's entire reputation, built over 30 years, was a house of cards held together by constant new investment and increasingly creative accounting. And then I found my own file. It was labeled JK_integration_protocol. And when I opened it, I felt physically sick. There were notes from my entire interview process, but they weren't about my qualifications. They were about my background. No family connections in finance sector. Limited social network in NYC. Student loans create financial pressure. Psychological profile suggests compliance and need for approval. They hadn't hired me despite being an outsider. They'd hired me because of it. The memo at the bottom, dated 2 weeks before my start date, explained everything. JK represents ideal profile for isolation protocol. Recommend standard treatment. exclusion from senior meetings, limited client contact, no mentor assignment. If she acclimates to outsider status without complaint, promote to junior partnership within 18 months and initiate Cyprus integration. If she demonstrates resistance or excessive curiosity, terminate before end of probationary period. Under no circumstances should she interface with Henderson, Morrison, or Caldwell accounts. I was a test. They'd deliberately isolated me to see if I could be broken down and rebuilt into someone who would eventually join their scheme. The cruelty wasn't personal, it was strategic. Every snub, every exclusion, every humiliating moment had been carefully orchestrated to destroy my confidence and make me desperate enough to accept anything they offered, including eventually participation in massive financial fraud. The really sick part? It had almost worked. I'd spent 3 months questioning myself, wondering what was wrong with me, willing to do almost anything to belong. If I hadn't accidentally seen that email, I would have eventually been grateful when they finally welcomed me into their inner circle. I would have felt chosen, special, and by then, I'd be too implicated to ever leave. "You're here early." I nearly screamed. James Garrison stood in the entrance to the analyst bay, impeccably dressed despite the early hour, holding a coffee cup that probably cost more than my monthly rent. His expression was pleasant, almost grandfatherly, but his eyes were calculating in a way that made my skin crawl. "Just wanted to prepare for my meeting with Victoria," I said, my voice surprisingly calm. "Ah, yes. Victoria mentioned you two would be having a chat." He walked closer, and I resisted the urge to back away from my computer screen. "You know, Jade, I've been watching your work. You're quite talented. Much more so than most of the analysts we bring in." He paused, letting the compliment hang in the air like bait. "It's a shame you've felt isolated here. That's going to change soon." The promise in his voice made my blood run cold. "I appreciate that, Mr. Garrison," I managed. He smiled, but it never reached his eyes. "Call me James. We're all family here. Or at least we will be." He glanced at my computer screen, which was still showing Derek's login screen, and something flickered across his face. "Victoria will be in around 9. Don't keep her waiting." Then he walked away, leaving me with the distinct impression that I'd just been warned, threatened, and offered a deal all at once. I had 90 minutes. I opened my shoulder bag and pulled out the small external hard drive I'd brought from home. My hands shook as I plugged it into the USB port and began copying files. Everything. The Cyprus protocol. The Ponzi structure. The integration protocols for new employees. The client accounts being systematically drained. I copied it all, watching the progress bar crawl across my screen with agonizing slowness. 68%. 73%. 81%. "What are you doing?" Derek stood 3 desks away, his laptop bag still over his shoulder, staring at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. We locked eyes for what felt like an eternity, and I watched him process what he was seeing. Me at my desk with an external drive, copying files I clearly wasn't supposed to have access to. "Derek," I started, but he held up his hand. "Don't." He walked closer, his voice low. "Just don't, Jade." He glanced around to make sure we were alone, then leaned in. "Whatever you're doing, stop. Right now. Delete it, put that drive away, and pretend this never happened." "You know what they're doing," I whispered. "You have to know." His face transformed, and for the first time since I'd met him, I saw actual emotion break through his carefully maintained corporate facade. "Fear. Of course I know. Why do you think I'm nice to them? Why do you think I laugh at James's jokes and get coffee with Victoria?" He ran his hand through his hair, looking suddenly 10 years older. "I figured it out 2 months in, just like you. But I made a different choice. You joined them." "I survived," he corrected, his voice sharp. "And I'm going to keep surviving. They made me an offer last week. Junior partnership. I start the advanced training next month." He said the last part with such bitterness that I almost felt sorry for him. "Almost. You could too if you just become a criminal?" I finished. Derek's expression hardened. "Everyone here is a criminal, Jade. Every bank, every investment firm, every hedge fund. We're just more honest about it internally." He glanced at my computer screen. 94%. Whatever you're copying, you've got about 2 minutes before that download finishes, and you have to make a choice. What choice? Whether you're going to walk into Victoria's office at 9 o'clock and accept their offer, or whether you're going to try to be a hero. He stepped back, his voice dropping to barely a whisper. Heroes don't last long in this industry. They especially don't last long when they've crossed James Garrison. The download hit 100%. I ejected the drive and slipped it into my bag, my decision made. Derek watched me with something that looked almost like sadness. "You're making a mistake," he said quietly. "Maybe. But it's my mistake to make." He nodded slowly, then did something that surprised me. He reached into his own bag and pulled out a business card. Not his Garrison and Hyde card, a different one, with just a name and phone number. Michael Torres. He's an investigative reporter at the Financial Times. If you're really going to do this, don't go to the SEC. Don't go to the police. Go to him first. Get the story out before they can bury you. I took the card, studying Derek's face. "Why are you helping me?" "Because someone should have helped me when I first figured it out." His voice was hollow. "And because I'm a coward who's going to have to live with that for the rest of my life. At least this way, maybe I can help someone who isn't." He walked away before I could respond, disappearing into the break room. I looked at the clock. 8:47 a.m. 13 minutes until my meeting with Victoria. I pulled out my phone and photographed the business card, then tucked it into my wallet. The external hard drive went into the hidden pocket of my bag. Then I stood up, smoothed my skirt, and walked toward Victoria's office with my heart hammering against my ribs. Her door was open. She sat behind her desk, backlit by the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Manhattan, looking like she'd been waiting for me her entire life. "Right on time," she said, smiling. "Please close the door and have a seat, Jade. We have so much to discuss." I closed the door, sealing myself in with her, and sat down in the chair across from her desk. She folded her hands and leaned forward, her smile widening. "Let's talk about your future at Garrison and Hyde. I think you're going to be very interested in what we have to offer." What she didn't know was that I'd already made my choice. What neither of us knew was that in the next 90 seconds, she would say something that would turn this entire situation into something infinitely more dangerous than simple corporate fraud. Something that would make me question everything I thought I understood about the scope of what I'd uncovered. But first, she needed to think she'd won. Victoria's office smelled like expensive perfume and old money. "I'm going to be direct with you, Jade, because I think you can handle it." She opened a leather portfolio and slid a document across the desk toward me. "We've been watching you very carefully these past 3 months. Your analytical skills are exceptional. Your discretion is admirable. And your desire to belong here. Well, that tells us everything we need to know about your character." The document was a partnership agreement. My brain stuttered over the words. Junior partner. Guaranteed annual compensation of $380,000 plus bonuses. I'd been making $73,000. This was more money than I'd ever imagined having, more than my parents had made in their entire lives combined. Victoria watched me process the numbers with a predatory satisfaction that made my skin crawl. "That's just the beginning," she continued. "Within 3 years, if you prove yourself, you'll be looking at 7 figures. Within 5, you'll never have to worry about money again. You'll have everything you've ever wanted." She paused, letting the offer sink its hooks in. "All you have to do is understand how things really work here." "And how do they work?" I asked, keeping my voice neutral. Victoria leaned back in her chair, studying me. "The financial industry is built on a very simple principle, Jade. Money flows from those who don't understand it to those who do. Our clients are extraordinarily wealthy, but most of them inherited that wealth. They didn't earn it, they don't understand it, and frankly, they don't deserve it." Her voice carried an edge of contempt that shocked me with its rawness. "We provide them with a service. We make them feel sophisticated, connected, part of an exclusive club. In exchange, we take a small percentage of what they'll never miss." $47 million isn't small, I said before I could stop myself. The temperature in the room dropped 20 degrees. Victoria's smile never wavered, but something deadly entered her eyes. "So you did open that email. Good. That saves us the trouble of dancing around the subject." She stood up and walked to the window, her back to me. "That money goes to a lot of places, Jade. It pays for the lifestyle our clients expect us to have. It funds expansion. It keeps this firm competitive in a market where everyone is doing exactly the same thing, just less elegantly. It's theft. It's reallocation." She turned to face me, her expression hardening. "Do you know what would happen if we didn't do this? Garrison and Hyde would be acquired by Goldman or Morgan Stanley within 18 months. Every employee here would be laid off or absorbed. The institution that James built over 3 decades would disappear. Instead, we've remained independent, profitable, and powerful. That's worth protecting. By destroying people's retirement funds?" Victoria laughed, and the sound was genuinely amused. "Oh, Jade. Still so naive. The clients whose funds we borrow are people with 30, 40, $50 million portfolios. They could lose half and still live better than 99% of humanity. We target the accounts that can absorb the loss without even noticing. She walked back to her desk. Besides, most of them make it back in market gains anyway. We're not stealing from orphans and widows. We're skimming from people who have more money than they could spend in 3 lifetimes. The rationalization was so smooth, so practiced, that I wondered how many times she'd given this exact speech. What about the Ponzi structure? I pressed. That's not just skimming. Victoria's eyebrows rose. You have been busy. I'm actually impressed. Most people in your position don't figure that part out for months. She sat down again, her posture relaxing. The Ponzi accusation is technically accurate, but functionally irrelevant. Yes, we use new investments to maintain returns for existing clients while the market is volatile. But unlike traditional Ponzi schemes, our underlying assets are real. We're not Bernie Madoff, creating fictional returns out of thin air. We're simply smoothing volatility and ensuring client satisfaction. Until the music stops. The music never stops, Jade. That's the whole point. She slid the partnership agreement closer to me. We've been doing this for 15 years. 15 years of consistent growth, satisfied clients, and zero regulatory attention. Do you know why? Because we're careful. Because we're smart. And because we only bring in people who understand what's at stake. I stared at the document, my mind racing. And if I say no? Victoria's smile returned, colder than before. Then you'll be unemployed by noon, and every firm on Wall Street will know you were fired for cause from Garrison and Hyde. James Garrison's reputation in this industry is impeccable. One phone call from him, and you'll never work in finance again. She let that sink in. You'll go back to wherever you came from, buried in student debt, with a worthless Wharton degree and a reputation as someone who couldn't hack it in the real world. The threat was delivered with such casual certainty that I almost believed she was doing me a favor by explaining it. But if you say yes, she continued, her voice softening, you become part of something bigger than yourself. You become family. And we protect our family, Jade. Always. She stood up and walked around the desk, perching on the edge just a few feet from me. I know this is a lot to process. I know it goes against everything they taught you in business school. But this is how the world actually works. This is how wealth is really created and maintained. I looked up at her, and for just a moment, I saw something almost human in her expression. A flicker of the person she might have been before she'd made this same choice years ago. How long do I have to decide? I asked. 24 hours. Sign the agreement, and tomorrow morning you'll start your real education here. She stood up and returned to her chair. Or clean out your desk and never speak of what you've learned. Either way, this conversation ends tomorrow at 9 a.m. I nodded slowly, picking up the partnership agreement. The numbers seemed to glow on the page. $380,000. More money than my parents made in 5 years. Enough to pay off my loans in 18 months. Enough to never worry about rent or groceries, or whether I could afford to get sick. All I had to do was become a criminal. I'll need to think about it, I said, standing up. Victoria smiled, and this time it almost looked genuine. Of course. Take your time. But Jade. I paused at the door. Don't make the mistake of thinking you have any other options. You don't. The only question is whether you're smart enough to recognize that. I walked out of her office, the partnership agreement clutched in my hand, and made it exactly 17 steps before I had to lean against the wall to keep from collapsing. My entire body was shaking. The external hard drive in my bag suddenly felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. Derek was at his desk, pretending to work, but I could see him watching me in his peripheral vision. I walked to the bathroom, locked myself in a stall, and pulled out my phone. The business card Derek had given me was still in my wallet. Michael Torres, Financial Times. I photographed the partnership agreement, then pulled up my encrypted email app and drafted a message. Mr. Torres, I have evidence of a major financial fraud at a prominent NYC investment firm, including partnership agreement offering me entry into the scheme. Need to meet ASAP. This is time sensitive. My finger hovered over the send button. This was the moment. The point of no return. If I sent this email, everything Victoria had threatened would come true. My career would be over. James Garrison would destroy me. I'd be marked as a traitor to the industry. But if I didn't send it, I'd become exactly what they wanted me to be. I pressed send. The email whooshed away into the digital void, and I sat there on the closed toilet seat, waiting for my heart to stop racing. My phone buzzed 30 seconds later. A reply from Michael Torres. Same-day meetups only in cases of imminent threat or danger. Is this that? If yes, respond with a number 1 to 10 for severity. Coffee shop on Lafayette at noon. Come alone. Don't use your work computer or phone after this message. I typed back, 9. His response was immediate. See you at noon. I had 2 hours to act normal, to pretend I was still considering Victoria's offer, to keep everyone at Garrison and hide from realizing what I'd just done. 2 hours before I either became a whistleblower or ended up as another cautionary tale about what happens when you cross the powerful. I walked back to my desk, sat down, and opened my email. There was a new message waiting, sent 3 minutes ago. The sender was an address I didn't recognize, but the subject line made my blood freeze. Before you make your decision, you should know the whole story. I clicked it open, my hands trembling. The email contained a single attachment. A PDF labeled Morrison_account_full_history.pdf. Morrison. I remembered that name from the integration protocol memo. One of the 3 accounts I was specifically forbidden from accessing. My cursor hovered over the download button. I clicked it. The file opened, and for the next 90 seconds, I read something that made everything I'd discovered so far look like a parking ticket. The Cyprus Protocol wasn't just about stealing from rich clients. It was about something far more dangerous, far more connected, and far more protected than simple corporate fraud. And I just sent evidence of it to a reporter. The words swam in front of my eyes as I read about Morrison's actual identity, about the other clients, in the same category, about what Garrison and Hyde was really being used for. My hands started shaking so badly, I could barely control the mouse. Someone had sent me this information deliberately. Someone inside the firm wanted me to know what I was really exposing. The question was, did they want to save me, or were they setting me up for something worse? I looked up from my screen and locked eyes with James Garrison, who stood in his office doorway across the floor, staring directly at me. He raised his coffee cup in a small salute, and even from this distance, I could see him smiling. He knew exactly what I'd just read. And somehow, that was part of the plan. If you're still watching right now, you're exactly the kind of viewer I love. Subscribe so I can keep giving you stories that touch your heart. Hit that bell so you never miss what happens next. I had 45 minutes until I was supposed to meet Michael Torres. The Morrison file was still open on my screen, its contents burning into my brain. Thomas Morrison wasn't just another wealthy client being defrauded. He was a front for something exponentially more dangerous. A United States senator. And according to the documents I'd just read, he wasn't the only one. 3 senators, 2 congressmen, a federal judge, and a deputy director at the SEC all had investment accounts at Garrison and Hyde that were actually sophisticated money laundering vehicles. The firm wasn't just running a Ponzi scheme. They were washing political bribes. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Don't go to that meeting. You're being followed. I froze, my eyes scanning the office without moving my head. Everyone looked normal. Derek was on a call. Patricia was organizing files. James Garrison had disappeared back into his office. But the prickling sensation on the back of my neck told me the text was accurate. Another buzz. Lookout window. Blue sedan. 2 men. Been there since you arrived. I stood up slowly, walking to the window as if I was just stretching my legs. 19 floors below, a blue sedan idled at the curb. Even from this distance, I could see 2 figures in the front seat, both facing the building entrance. My phone buzzed again. They're not FBI. They're private security. Garrison's people. They'll follow you to the meeting, identify Torres, and make both of you disappear. You need a different plan. My heart hammered against my ribs. Who is this? I typed back. Someone who made the same mistake you're making. Conference room C. 2 minutes. Come alone. I looked around the office. Conference room C was the small interior room they used for private calls, no windows, soundproofed. It was either a trap or my only chance at getting real information. I grabbed my bag, making sure the external hard drive was still secure, and walked as casually as I could toward the conference room. The hallway was empty. I pushed open the door to conference room C and found myself face to face with someone I never expected to see. Patricia, Victoria's assistant. She closed the door behind me and engaged the lock in one smooth motion. You have about 90 seconds before someone notices we're both missing, so listen carefully. Her entire demeanor had changed. The mousy, agreeable assistant was gone, replaced by someone sharp and purposeful. My real name is Rebecca Chin. I'm an FBI agent embedded in this firm for the past 14 months. And you just blew my entire operation. The room tilted. What? That email you sent to Michael Torres? We've had his communications flagged for weeks. He's not a reporter, he's a fixer. He works for the same people who protect Garrison and Hyde. Derek gave you that card specifically to lead you into a trap. She pulled out her phone, showing me a surveillance photo of the man I thought was Michael Torres meeting with James Garrison. They knew you'd try to go to the press. They've been planning for this contingency since the day you were hired. I felt like I was going to be sick. Derek's one of them? Derek's terrified and doing exactly what they tell him to do to survive. But yes, functionally, he's compromised. She checked her watch. We have 60 seconds. The operation I've been running is about to go active. We're taking down the Morrison network, all of it. Senators, congressmen, the SEC deputy director, everyone. But we needed someone with direct evidence of the Cyprus Protocol who wasn't an FBI agent. Someone whose testimony would be unimpeachable. You set me up. No. We didn't know you existed until you accessed that email 2 days ago. That triggered our alerts. Her expression softened slightly. But you finding that integration protocol, downloading those files, copying them to an external drive. That was all you. You just gave us exactly what we needed. The Morrison file, I said, understanding flooding through me. You sent that to me. To show you what you were really dealing with. To make sure you understood the stakes. She handed me a business card. A real one this time, with an FBI seal. Special Agent Rebecca Chin. And right now, you have a choice to make that's going to determine whether you survive the next 24 hours. What choice? You can run. Take that hard drive, disappear, and hope Garrison's people don't find you before we finish building our case. You might make it. Probably not, but you might. She paused. Or you can work with us. Go back to your desk, tell Victoria you're accepting the partnership, and let us wire you for the integration ceremony tomorrow morning. The integration ceremony. I'd read about it in the protocols. The meeting where new partners were officially brought into the Cyprus Protocol and made to participate in an actual fraudulent transaction to ensure they were implicated. You want me to become a criminal to catch criminals? I want you to help us take down a network that's been corrupting federal oversight of the financial industry for over a decade. Rebecca's voice was urgent. The ceremony is when they explain everything. Where the money goes, who it protects, how deep the network runs. It's the only time they say it all out loud. We've never had anyone inside that meeting who was working with us. If you do this, you'll have immunity for any crimes committed under FBI supervision. Full protection. New identity if you need it. And if I say no, then you walk out of here, and I never saw you. But those men in the blue sedan will follow you, and I can't protect you once you leave this building. She checked her watch again. 15 seconds. What's it going to be, Jade? My mind raced through the implications. If I ran, I'd spend the rest of my life looking over my shoulder. If I stayed, I'd have to walk deeper into the very thing I'd been trying to expose. But I'd also have the FBI behind me. And I'd have a chance to actually take these people down instead of just escaping them. How do I know you're really FBI? Rebecca pulled out her credentials. Real ones, not the fake ID badges everyone had seen in movies. Badge number, photo, official seal. Then she pulled up her phone and showed me a live feed from what looked like a surveillance van. Multiple screens showing Garrison and Hyde from different angles, including one pointed directly at the conference room we were standing in. 10 seconds, she said. I thought about my parents who'd worked their entire lives and never made a fraction of what Victoria was offering. I thought about all the people whose retirement funds were being slowly drained to pay for James Garrison's lifestyle. I thought about senators taking bribes while pretending to regulate the very industry paying them. What do I have to do? I asked. Rebecca's expression flooded with relief. Go back to your desk. At exactly 11:45, you're going to get a call from a number you don't recognize. Answer it. Tell them you're ready to accept Victoria's offer, but you need to discuss the terms. They'll set up a meeting for this afternoon. That's when we'll brief you properly and get you fitted with recording equipment. They'll search me. Not if you're a new partner they think they've successfully recruited. Once you're inside, you're family. That's their blind spot. She moved toward the door. I'm going out first. Wait 30 seconds, then go back to your desk and act normal. Can you do that? I nodded, not trusting my voice. Rebecca unlocked the door, then paused. Jade, what you're about to do is incredibly brave. But you need to understand something. These people have killed to protect this operation. If they suspect for even a second that you're working with us, I won't be able to save you in time. So once you commit to this, you can't hesitate. You can't show doubt. You have to become exactly what they think you are." Then she was gone. I counted to 30, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. When I stepped out of the conference room, the office looked exactly the same as it had 5 minutes ago. Derek was still on his call. Patricia, Rebecca, was back at her desk, typing away as if nothing had happened. James Garrison was visible through his office window, laughing at something on his computer screen. None of them knew that everything was about to change. I walked back to my desk and sat down, forcing my hands to stop shaking. The Morrison file was still open on my screen. I closed it carefully, then opened the partnership agreement Victoria had given me and pretended to read through it. My eyes scanned the same paragraph 5 times without absorbing a single word. At 11:43, my phone rang. I stared at the unknown number, letting it ring once, twice, 3 times before answering. "This is Jade. Ms. Kensington." The voice was male, smooth, professional. "My name is Richard. I'm calling on behalf of Mr. Garrison. I understand you've received a partnership offer and may have some questions about the terms." This was it. The moment where I either committed fully or backed out. "Yes," I said, keeping my voice steady. "I'd like to discuss the details before I sign anything." "Of course." "Very prudent. Would you be available for a meeting at 2 p.m. today? We have a private office location in Midtown where we handle these discussions." A private location. Away from the FBI surveillance. Away from any backup Rebecca might have positioned. The smart play would be to say no, to insist on meeting at Garrison and hide. But the smart play would also make them suspicious. "That works for me," I said. "Excellent. A car will pick you up from your building at 1:45. Black Mercedes, license plate GH, 2847. The driver will have identification." He paused. "And Ms. Kensington? Congratulations on your decision. You're making a very wise choice." The line went dead. I sat there, staring at my phone, wondering if I'd just agreed to my own execution. Then I noticed Derek watching me from across the room. Our eyes met, and for just a moment, I saw something flicker across his face. Guilt? Warning? Regret? Before I could decipher it, he looked away. My phone buzzed with a text from Rebecca's number. "We heard. Team will be in position. You'll have eyes on you the entire time. We won't let anything happen to you." But her next text made my blood run cold. "Just got word, there's been a development. Morrison knows something's wrong. He's scheduled an emergency meeting with Garrison for 3 p.m. If he spooks them before we're ready, they'll destroy everything and disappear. You need to get them talking before he arrives." I checked the time, 11:47 a.m. I had 3 hours and 13 minutes to get wired up, get to this mystery location, convince some of the most dangerous people in finance that I wanted to join their criminal conspiracy, extract a full confession, and do it all before a sitting U.S. senator showed up and potentially triggered a complete shutdown. No pressure. At 1:30, I stood up and told Derek I was stepping out for lunch. He nodded without looking at me. As I rode the elevator down, I caught my reflection in the polished steel doors. I looked terrified. I had 15 minutes to get to the FBI briefing location Rebecca had texted me, get fitted with whatever surveillance equipment they needed me to wear, learn whatever cover story would keep me alive, and transform my face into something that wouldn't scream federal informant. The elevator doors opened onto the lobby, and I stepped out into the afternoon sunlight. The blue sedan was still there. I could see the 2 men inside watching me. I turned right, walking toward the coffee shop on the corner like I didn't have a care in the world, while every instinct screamed at me to run. I was halfway down the block when a hand grabbed my arm. I spun, adrenaline flooding my system, and found myself face to face with Derek. He'd followed me out of the building, and his expression was more serious than I'd ever seen it. "I know what you're doing," he said quietly. "And I know who Rebecca really is." My heart stopped. "Derek, I'm not going to stop you," he interrupted. "But you need to know something before you walk into that meeting. Richard, the guy who called you? He's not just Garrison's lawyer. He's former CIA. He's the person they bring in when they need to make problems disappear permanently." He glanced over his shoulder at the blue sedan. "Those guys in the car? They're not going to follow you to the meeting. They're going to follow Rebecca's team, and when your backup tries to move in, those 2 are going to run interference." "How do you know all this?" Derek's laugh was bitter. "Because I've been trying to get out for 8 months. I went to the FBI 6 months ago, wore a wire to 3 different meetings, got them hundreds of hours of recordings. You want to know what happened? The FBI agent I was working with disappeared. Just vanished. And 2 days later, I got a personal visit from Richard explaining exactly what would happen to my family if I ever spoke to law enforcement again. The world tilted on its axis. Rebecca said. Rebecca Chin might be a real FBI agent, but that doesn't mean the operation she's running isn't compromised. He pressed something into my hand, a small USB drive. This is everything I recorded, everything I learned, including the names of 3 FBI agents who are on Garrison's payroll. Rebecca's name isn't on that list, but her supervisor's is. I stared at the USB drive like it was a live grenade. Why are you telling me this? Because you're going to do what I couldn't, Derek said. You're going to burn it all down. But you can't trust the FBI. Not completely. You need insurance. He glanced at his watch. You have 12 minutes to get to Rebecca's briefing. Go. Let them wire you up. Let them think you're their asset. But when you get to that meeting, don't say anything incriminating until you're absolutely sure you know who's listening. What are you going to do? Derek smiled, and it was the saddest thing I'd ever seen. I'm going to go back to my desk and keep being a coward. But at least I'll know I gave you a fighting chance. He started to walk away, then turned back. One more thing. The integration ceremony? It's not tomorrow morning. That's what they tell everyone. The real ceremony is tonight at 8. They moved it up because of Morrison's emergency meeting. Rebecca doesn't know that yet. He disappeared into the crowd before I could respond. I stood there on the corner of Madison Avenue, clutching a USB drive that could either save my life or end it, with 11 minutes to get to an FBI briefing that might be compromised, before getting into a car with a former CIA operative who specialized in making problems disappear. Every option was a trap. Every choice could be the wrong one. But standing still wasn't an option either. I started walking toward the address Rebecca had given me, my mind racing through scenarios. If Derek was telling the truth, then Rebecca's operation was compromised, and walking into that meeting wired up would get me killed. But if Derek was lying, if he was actually working for Garrison and trying to make me paranoid enough to refuse FBI protection, then I was about to face these people completely alone. The address was a nondescript office building 3 blocks away. I rode the elevator to the 7th floor and found Rebecca waiting in a corner office with 2 other agents and enough surveillance equipment to run a small war. You're cutting it close, she said, then saw my face. What happened? This was the moment. Tell her about Derek's warning, and potentially blow the whole operation if he was right about her supervisor being compromised. Stay silent, and potentially walk into a death trap. I made my decision. Nothing, I said. Just nervous. Rebecca studied me for a long moment, and I wondered if she could see right through me. Then she nodded and gestured to the equipment. Let's get you ready. We don't have much time. As they fitted me with a wire so small I could barely feel it, explaining how the recording system worked, and what phrases would trigger emergency extraction, I felt the USB drive Derek had given me pressing against my leg from inside my pocket. In less than an hour, I'd be in a room with people who'd killed to protect their secrets, wearing a wire that might be sending my confession directly to the very people I was trying to expose, carrying evidence that could either save me or condemn me. And somewhere in this city, a United States senator was about to walk into an emergency meeting that could trigger the destruction of everything I'd worked to uncover. The only question was, who would get there first? The black Mercedes arrived exactly at 1:45 p.m. The driver was a man in his 50s with dead eyes and an earpiece, the kind of person who'd seen things that made corporate fraud look like jaywalking. He checked my ID against a tablet, nodded once, and opened the rear door without saying a word. I climbed in, feeling the wire taped between my shoulder blades suddenly feel as obvious as a neon sign. The car pulled into traffic, and I watched the blue sedan fall in behind us, just like Derek had warned. My phone buzzed. A text from Rebecca. We have eyes on you. Everything is fine. You're doing great. But I was also watching the cars around us through the tinted windows, and I'd spent enough time in New York traffic to know when a pattern emerged. The blue sedan wasn't following me. It was following the unmarked van that was following me. Derek had been right about that, at least. Which meant he might be right about everything else. The drive took 17 minutes. We pulled up to a brownstone in the East 60s that looked like every other expensive townhouse on the block. The kind of place that cost $20 million and existed specifically to be anonymous. The driver opened my door and gestured to the entrance. 3rd floor. They're expecting you. I climbed the steps, and the door opened before I could knock. Richard stood there, exactly as I'd pictured him from his voice. Late 40s, expensive suit, the kind of smile that never touched his eyes. Former CIA, Derek had said. The person they brought in to make problems disappear. Ms. Kensington. Thank you for coming. He stepped aside to let me enter. Please follow me. The townhouse was beautiful in the way that obscene wealth always is. Art that belonged in museums, furniture that cost more than cars, the kind of casual luxury that announced you'd transcended normal human concerns like budgets or consequences. We climbed 2 flights of stairs, and I felt my heart rate increasing with every step. The wire felt like it was burning against my skin. Richard opened a door to what looked like a private library. James Garrison sat in a leather chair by the window, and standing next to him was someone I recognized from the Morrison files. Senator Thomas Morrison himself, 20 years older than his official photo but unmistakable. Ah, Jade! James stood, all grandfatherly warmth and false kindness. I'm so glad you could join us. I believe you know Richard. And this is an old friend of the firm, Thomas Morrison. The senator didn't offer his hand. He just studied me with the kind of assessment I imagined he usually reserved for political rivals. She's younger than I expected. Bright though, James said. Very bright. She figured out the Cyprus Protocol on her own in less than 4 months. That's faster than anyone except Victoria. Morrison's expression didn't change. And we're sure about her? We're about to be. James gestured to the chair across from him. Please sit down, Jade. We have a lot to discuss and not much time. I sat, feeling the wire pressing against my back, wondering if Rebecca's team could hear everything, or if Derek's warning about FBI corruption meant my confession was being broadcast directly to the people who'd make sure I never testified. Richard closed the door and stood in front of it. Let me be frank with you, James began, his voice taking on a different quality, harder, more businesslike. The partnership offer Victoria gave you is real, but incomplete. The real opportunity we're offering is something far more valuable than money. What's that? I asked, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. Power. It was Morrison who spoke, his political polish replaced by something more raw. Real power. The kind that lets you shape policy, influence markets, determine which companies survive and which fail. The kind that makes you untouchable. James nodded. Garrison and Hyde isn't just an investment firm, Jade. It's a mechanism. A way for people who understand how the world really works to maintain control, while everyone else fights over scraps. The Cyprus Protocol exists not to steal from our clients, but to create leverage over them. My blood went cold. Leverage? Most of our highest value clients are politicians, federal officials, or people closely connected to them, Richard explained, his voice clinical. They give us their money to invest. We generate returns through the Ponzi structure, which keeps them happy. But we also siphon off portions of their capital into accounts they don't know exist. Accounts that create a paper trail of financial impropriety if we ever need it. You're blackmailing them, I said. We're ensuring alignment of interests, James corrected. Senator Morrison, for example, sits on the Senate Banking Committee. He has oversight authority over the entire financial services industry. Having him as a client means we have insurance against unwanted regulatory attention. Morrison didn't even flinch. And I have insurance that certain policy positions I take receive generous support from the financial sector. It's symbiotic. But the fraud is real, I pressed. You're still stealing from people. We're redistributing from people who have far too much to people who can use it more effectively, James said. Every dollar we borrow from overfed portfolios goes toward maintaining a system that keeps markets stable, regulations reasonable, and the right people in positions of power. Without us, you'd have chaos. Financial crises. Populist movements destroying the mechanisms that actually create wealth. The rationalization was so complete, so internally consistent, that I could see how people got drawn in. They'd constructed an entire worldview where their crimes were actually civic virtue, where theft was stewardship, where corruption was stability. And you want me to join this, I said. We want you to understand it first, Richard said. Most junior partners take months to grasp the full scope. But we don't have months. We have a situation that requires immediate action, and Victoria believes you're capable of handling it. James leaned forward. One of our clients has become problematic. A tech billionaire named David Chun who invested $200 million with us 3 years ago. He started asking uncomfortable questions about returns, requesting audits, threatening to withdraw his capital. He paused. If he pulls out, it triggers a cascade. Other clients get nervous. They start asking questions. The whole structure becomes vulnerable. So what do you need me to do? Convince him to stay. James slid a folder across the table. You'll meet with him tomorrow, present an analysis showing why his concerns are unfounded, and use your considerable analytical skills to make the numbers look perfect. You'll save this firm, protect our network, and prove that you understand how to be part of something bigger than yourself. I opened the folder. It was a complete fabrication, false transaction histories, invented fund performance, completely manufactured audit results. If I presented this to David Chun, I'd be committing securities fraud in the most explicit way possible, which was exactly what the FBI needed me to do on tape. And if I do this successfully? I asked. Then you're in. Fully. Tonight at 8, we hold the Real integration ceremony. Not tomorrow morning. That's what we tell people to gauge their reactions. The real ceremony happens fast, before people have time to reconsider. James smiled. You'll become a full partner, with access to everything. The offshore accounts, the client lists, the political network. You'll be part of the family. I felt the wire against my back and made my decision. I'll do it, I said. The relief in the room was palpable. James stood up, Morrison actually smiled, and Richard's expression softened slightly. Excellent, James said. Richard will take you through the specifics of the Chun presentation. We'll see you tonight at 8, at our facility in Red Hook. Victoria will text you the address. I stood up, shook James's hand, and let Richard guide me toward the door. We were 3 steps into the hallway when everything went wrong. Richard's earpiece crackled with something I couldn't hear. His expression transformed instantly, and his hand shot out to grab my arm. Not gently, but with the kind of grip that left bruises. Don't move. What's happening? I tried to pull away, but he was immovable. James appeared in the doorway, his phone to his ear, his face darker than I'd ever seen it. We have a problem. The FBI just raided our main office. They have warrants for the servers. My heart stopped. Rebecca had moved too early. Or the operation had been compromised. Or something had gone catastrophically wrong with the timing. Richard was speaking into his earpiece. Containment protocol. Now. Then he looked at me, and I saw my death in his eyes. She's wired. Has to be. That's the only way they'd know to move today. No. I started, but Richard was already patting me down with professional efficiency. His hands found the wire in less than 5 seconds. He ripped it off, and I gasped in pain. The device dangled from his fingers, still broadcasting. He crushed it under his heel, and the tiny light went dark. Rebecca Chun, he said into the crushed remains. I know you can still hear this. Your operation just failed. Your informant is ours now. And by the time your people breach this building, we'll be long gone. James grabbed my other arm. Get her to the car. Red Hook facility. We'll decide what to do with her there. I tried to fight, but Richard had at least 80 pounds on me and training I couldn't match. He dragged me toward the stairs, and I could hear voices shouting from the first floor. FBI, maybe, or Garrison security team. Everything was chaos. We made it to the second floor landing when the windows exploded inward. Glass shattered everywhere, and suddenly Rebecca was there with 3 other agents, weapons drawn, shouting FBI. Get on the ground. Richard shoved me toward them, and I tumbled down 5 stairs, hitting the landing hard enough to see stars. When my vision cleared, Richard was gone, disappeared through a door I hadn't noticed. James Garrison stood at the top of the stairs with his hands raised, looking more annoyed than afraid. And Senator Morrison was already on his phone, undoubtedly calling every powerful contact he had. Rebecca hauled me to my feet. Are you hurt? I'm fine, I gasped, even though I wasn't. Richard, he got away. We have teams on every exit. He won't make it out of the building. She looked at the crushed wire in my hand. Did you get it? Did they confess? All of it, I said. The blackmail, the political corruption, everything. It's all on tape. Rebecca's expression flooded with relief. The wire had a backup transmitter. Even after he crushed it, it was still sending for 30 seconds. We got everything. 2 agents were handcuffing James Garrison, reading him his rights. He looked at me as they led him past, and I expected rage, but instead, he just looked tired. You should have taken the money, Jade. You would have been so good at this. Then he was gone, and I was left standing in a destroyed townhouse, covered in glass and bruises, while federal agents swarmed through every room. Rebecca put a hand on my shoulder. You did it. We have enough to bring down the entire network. Morrison, the other senators, the federal officials, all of it. What about Richard? Her expression darkened. We'll find him. We always do. But I remembered Derek's warning and the look in Richard's eyes, and I knew that wasn't true. Some people didn't get found. Some people just disappeared into whatever dark infrastructure protected operations like this, waiting for their next assignment. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. You made a powerful enemy today. Watch your back. Derek. Trying to warn me one last time, even after everything. I looked at Rebecca. What happens now? Now you give your formal statement, you enter witness protection if you want it, and you start rebuilding your life. She paused. You brought down one of the biggest financial corruption networks in U.S. history, Jade. That means something. But as I walked out of that townhouse into the evening air, past news vans that were already gathering and reporters shouting questions, I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd only seen part of the picture. Richard had escaped. Morrison had his phone call before they'd arrested him. And somewhere in the machinery of power, people were already working to contain the damage, to protect whatever could be protected, to make sure the really important secrets stayed buried. I'd exposed one network. But Derek's USB drive was still in my pocket, with information about FBI corruption that Rebecca might not want revealed. Information that could either ensure my safety or make me an even bigger target. The war wasn't over. I'd just won the first battle. And as I climbed into the FBI vehicle that would take me to give my statement, I made a decision. I would tell Rebecca everything Derek had given me. I would trust that there were still enough good people in the system to make it work. But I would also make copies. Lots of copies. In safe deposit boxes and encrypted cloud storage, and with lawyers who had instructions to release everything if anything happened to me. Because the one thing I'd learned at Garrison and Hyde was that the only real protection in this world was making yourself more valuable alive than dead. 3 months later, I watched from the gallery as Senator Thomas Morrison was sentenced to 18 years in federal prison. James Garrison got 22. Victoria Pemberton took a plea deal for 15. 6 other politicians went down with them, along with the deputy director of the SEC and a federal judge. Derek disappeared the day before he was supposed to testify. I sometimes wonder if he finally found the courage to run, or if Richard found him first. Rebecca's supervisor was quietly reassigned after my testimony about FBI corruption. She made deputy director 6 months later. And me? I finished my master's degree in forensic accounting, started a consulting firm helping companies identify financial fraud, and became the person corporations called when they thought something was wrong but didn't know how to prove it. I never worked in investment finance again. But I learned something more valuable than any job could teach. The people who seem powerful are only powerful because we let them be. The moment someone is willing to stand up, to expose the truth, to choose what's right over what's profitable, that's when the whole carefully constructed illusion starts to crack. They treated me like an outsider because they needed me to feel desperate enough to be corrupted. Instead, my outsider status became the exact thing that let me see clearly enough to bring them all down. And that made all the difference.